Hello viewers, welcome to Sleepy Mind Channel. Tonight we'll be exploring one of the most lovely season, rainy season. Close your eyes for a second. Smell that sharp, earthy scent that rises from the pavement just as the first few drops hit the dust. We've all felt it. That sudden shift in the air that makes you want to cancel your plans, grab a blanket and just watch. We think we know rain. We curse it when we're stuck in traffic, and we pray for it when the wells run dry. But rain isn't just water falling from the sky. It's a cosmic traveler. It's a sculptor of mountains, a carrier of ancient bacteria, and a witness to the birth of our planet. Today, we aren't just talking about the weather. We're diving into 100 mind-blowing truths about the rain that will change the way you look at a cloudy sky forever. Let's get wet. Think about every cartoon you've ever seen. Think about the logo of a water brand or the emoji on your phone. What do they have in common? They all show a raindrop as a sleek, pointed pearl. Perfect teardrop. Well, I'm here to tell you that the sky has been lying to you. If you could freeze time and look at a falling raindrop, you wouldn't see a jewel. You'd see a squashed hamburger bun. When a drop of water begins its journey in the upper atmosphere, it starts as a sphere. Surface tension, the skin of the water, pulls the molecules together into the most efficient shape possible. But the moment gravity wins and that drop starts its descent, the atmosphere fights back. As the drop falls, it encounters air resistance. Think of it like sticking your hand out of a car window at 60 miles per hour. The wind pushes against you. For a raindrop, this air pressure pushes directly against the bottom of the drop. While the top stays rounded due to surface tension, the bottom flattens out. By the time the drop is mid-fall, it looks remarkably like the top half of a burger bun, wide, flat, and slightly curved. If the drop is particularly large, the air pressure becomes so intense that the center of the bun starts to cave in, making it look like a floating bowl or a parachute. Eventually, the air wins, the parachute snaps, and the drop shatters into smaller, more manageable spheres. We find comfort in the teardrop shape because it represents sadness or purity, but the hamburger bun shape represents a struggle. It's a story of a tiny object trying to navigate a chaotic world of pressure and resistance. Next time you're standing in a downpour, don't imagine tears falling from the sky. Imagine billions of tiny, watery parachutes fighting the air just to reach the thirsty ground beneath your feet. It's not a fall, it's a battle. There is a scent that is more nostalgic than old books and more evocative than a home-cooked meal. It's that sharp, metallic, yet deeply earthy smell that rises from the pavement right as a storm begins. We call it petrichor. But here is the secret. You aren't actually smelling the water. You are smelling the blood of the stones and the sweat of the earth. The word comes from the Greek petra, stone, and ichor, the golden fluid that flowed in the veins of the gods. For decades, we didn't know where it came from. In 1964, two Australian researchers discovered that during dry spells, certain plants secrete an oil that gets absorbed by clay soils and rocks. This oil acts as a pause button for seeds, preventing them from sprouting when there isn't enough water to survive. At the same time, a soil bacteria called actinomycetes produces a compound called geosmin. When the rain finally hits, it acts like a physical trigger. The impact of the raindrop traps tiny bubbles of air against the soil. These bubbles then shoot upward, like the fizz in a glass of champagne, carrying the plant oils and the geosmin into the air. This aerosol effect is what reaches your nose. Humans are hypersensitive to this smell. Some scientists believe we can detect geosmin at concentrations as low as 5 parts per trillion. To put that in perspective, that's like detecting a single drop of ink in an Olympic-sized swimming pool. Why? Because for our ancestors, the smell of petrichor wasn't just a pleasant aroma. It was a survival signal. It meant the drought was over. It meant the animals would return, the crops would grow, and the tribe would live. When you breathe in that post-rain scent, you are connecting to a 100,000-year-old instinct of relief. Imagine looking up and seeing a dark, heavy curtain of rain hanging from a cloud. You can see the gray streaks reaching for the earth. You run for cover, you grab your umbrella, you brace yourself to get soaked. And then nothing, not a single drop. You are standing in the middle of a ghost rain, a phenomenon known as virga. Virga is the ultimate tease of the meteorological world. It happens when rain falls from a high-altitude cloud that passes through a layer of extremely dry or hot air on its way down. As the liquid drops hit this dry pocket, they begin to evaporate instantly. They turn back into invisible water vapor before they ever have a chance to touch a blade of grass or the top of your head. In the desert southwest of the United States or the plains of Australia, you can see virga as long, wispy tails hanging from the bottoms of clouds, looking like jellyfish floating in a blue sea. From a distance, it looks like a localized storm, but underneath it, the ground remains bone dry. Sometimes, this evaporation causes the air to cool rapidly and sink, creating dry microbursts, invisible winds that can be dangerous to small aircraft, even though there isn't a drop of water in sight. There is something poetic and slightly heartbreaking about virga. It is the sky's attempt to give back to the earth, only for the atmosphere to steal the gift away at the last second. It reminds us that just because we can see a change coming doesn't mean it will ever land. It's a visual representation of effort without result, a reminder that the journey from the heavens to the earth is much harder than it looks. If you dropped a penny from the top of the Empire State Building, there's a common myth that it would fall fast enough to crack the sidewalk or kill a pedestrian. Now think about a rain cloud, sitting thousands of feet in the air, sometimes as high as 10,000 to 20,000 feet. If a raindrop fell with pure, unchecked acceleration, it would hit you like a sniper's bullet. So, why does a rainstorm feel like a massage instead of a firing squad? The answer lies in a hidden speed limit built into the laws of physics. In a vacuum, gravity is a relentless accelerator. Every second an object falls, it gets faster and faster. But our atmosphere is not a vacuum. It's a thick soup of gases. As a raindrop begins its long journey down, it experiences two opposing forces: the downward pull of gravity and the upward push of air resistance, drag. In the beginning, gravity wins and the drop speeds up. But because of that hamburger bun shape we discussed earlier, the raindrop is incredibly unaerodynamic, creates a lot of friction. Eventually, the upward force of the air pushing against the bottom of the drop becomes exactly equal to the downward weight of the drop itself. At this precise moment, the drop stops accelerating. It has reached what scientists call terminal velocity. For a typical raindrop, this is roughly 14 to 22 miles per hour, 22 to 35 kilometers per hour. No matter how high the cloud is, even if it's 5 miles up, the drop will never fall faster than that limit. It's the atmosphere's way of putting a governor on the rain, ensuring that nature's irrigation system doesn't turn into a weapon of mass destruction. There is a profound sense of safety in this law of physics. It reminds us that the world is designed with buffers. Even when something is falling from a terrifying height, there is a natural resistance that keeps things gentle. Next time you're out in a storm and you feel those drops tapping against your skin, remember that you are being protected by the very air around you. The atmosphere is essentially catching the rain and handing it to you gently, rather than letting it fall. Go to your kitchen and pour a glass of water. Look at it. It looks clear, fresh, and brand new, right? Wrong. That water is older than the mountains. It's older than the forests. In fact, there is a very high statistical probability that the rain falling on your roof today was once inside the stomach of a Tyrannosaurus rex 65 million years ago. In the world of rain, there is no such thing as new water. There is only recycled water. The Earth is a closed system. This means that, for the most part, the amount of water we have today is the same amount we had when the planet was formed. We aren't getting new water shipments from space, except for the occasional icy comet. This is the magic of the hydrologic cycle. When it rains, that water enters the soil, flows into rivers, and eventually reaches the ocean. From there, the sun's energy evaporates it back into the sky to form clouds, and the cycle repeats. This process is the ultimate filtration system, but the molecules themselves, 2 parts hydrogen, 1 part oxygen, are nearly indestructible over millions of years. This means the water molecules currently falling as rain have been through the lungs of mammoths, through the steam of ancient volcanoes, and through the baths of Roman emperors. It is a constant, shimmering loop of liquid history. The rain you see today is just a temporary phase of a molecule that has seen the entire history of life on Earth. This fact changes how we view our connection to time. We often feel like our lives are short and disconnected from the past, but we are literally made of the same stuff that built the ancient world. When you walk through a rainstorm, you are walking through a liquid museum. You are interacting with the same molecules that sustained every hero, villain, and creature that ever lived. It makes the world feel smaller, more intimate, and incredibly precious. We aren't just consumers of water. We are temporary caretakers of a primordial treasure. We think of rain as a nuisance, something that ruins a picnic or gets your socks wet. But if you were standing on the surface of Saturn or Neptune with a very, very strong suit, you wouldn't be worried about getting wet. You'd be worried about being pelted by gemstones. On the gas giants of our solar system, it doesn't rain water. It rains diamonds. This sounds like science fiction, but it's a matter of extreme chemistry. On planets like Saturn and Jupiter, the atmosphere is rich in methane. When massive lightning storms crack through the upper atmosphere, they zap the methane gas, stripping the hydrogen away and leaving behind pure carbon in the form of soot. As this carbon soot begins to fall toward the planet's core, the atmospheric pressure increases to mind-boggling levels. Imagine the weight of an entire ocean pressing down on a single point. This pressure crushes the falling soot into graphite, and as it falls deeper and the pressure increases further, the graphite is compressed into solid diamonds. Scientists estimate that some of these raindrops could be a centimeter in diameter, large enough to be set into a ring. However, don't plan a mining mission just yet. As these diamonds fall into the extreme heat of the planet's inner layers, they eventually melt into a sea of liquid carbon. It is a literal cycle of treasure from the sky that exists only because of the sheer violence of those planetary environments. It puts our bad weather into perspective, doesn't it? We complain about a little gray sky and some mud, while elsewhere in our own cosmic neighborhood, the sky is literally crushing the air into jewels. It reminds us that rain is just a word for matter falling from the sky. And depending on where you are in the universe, that can be anything from life-giving water to molten glass or solid diamonds. It makes our earthly rain feel like a gentle, humble miracle. Imagine waking up to the sound of a heavy downpour. You open your curtains, expecting to see the usual gray, misty morning, but instead, your heart skips a beat. The sky isn't gray, it's a deep, bruised crimson. The water running down your window isn't clear. It looks like thick, dark blood. In 2001, in Kerala, India, this wasn't a horror movie plot. It was reality. For weeks, the sky literally bled onto the streets. Was it a sign of the apocalypse? Or something even more strange? The red rain of Kerala is one of the most famous meteorological anomalies in history. Initially, people were terrified, fearing chemical spills or supernatural curses. Local scientists jumped into action to find the culprit. When they placed the rainwater under a microscope, they found something startling. The water was filled with microscopic red cells that looked eerily like biological spores. One controversial theory, proposed by physicist Godfrey Lewis, suggested these were extraterrestrial cells, biological entities from a comet that had exploded in the upper atmosphere, seeded into the rain. However, the more grounded but equally fascinating truth eventually emerged. The rain was colored by the spores of a specific type of local green algae called Trentipolia. A massive bloom of this algae had occurred, and its spores had been swept up into the clouds in enormous quantities. When the rain formed, it acted as a giant vacuum cleaner, grabbing the spores and dragging them down. The concentration was so high that it changed the very chemistry and color of the rainfall. It proved that rain is the world's most effective collector. It brings whatever is hiding in the air directly to our doorstep. The red rain reminds us that we live on a planet that is still capable of surprising us. Even in an age of satellites and advanced sensors, nature can still produce a glitch in the matrix that makes us feel small and wonderstruck. It's a reminder that the sky is a bridge between different worlds, the world of the microscopic algae on the ground and the vast, swirling currents of the atmosphere above. Next time you see a normal storm, remember that the sky is always carrying secrets. Sometimes it just forgets to hide them. We've always been taught that rain is a purely physical process: evaporation, condensation, precipitation, a machine-like cycle of heat and cold. But what if I told you that clouds are alive? What if I told you that some rainstorms don't start because of the temperature, but because a tiny, microscopic traveler decided it was time to move house? Welcome to the world of bioprecipitation. For a long time, we thought rain needed inorganic hertz, like dust or soot, to form. But recently, microbiologists discovered that the clouds are teeming with life, specifically a bacteria called Pseudomonas syringae. These bacteria are master manipulators of the weather. They have evolved a special protein on their outer membrane that allows them to bind water molecules into a very specific lattice structure. This structure allows ice to form at much warmer temperatures than it normally would. In nature, pure water doesn't actually freeze at 0 degrees Celsius, 32 degrees Fahrenheit. It can stay liquid down to minus 40 degrees Celsius if it's super pure. But these rain-making bacteria can force water to freeze and fall as snow or rain at temperatures much closer to freezing. Why would a bacteria want to cause a storm? Because it's their transportation system. They live on plants on the ground, get swept up into the clouds by the wind, and then trigger the rain so they can hitch a ride back down to a new host plant thousands of miles away. The rain isn't just a weather event, it's a biological bus route. This changes the way we think about life on Earth. We usually think of life as something that happens on the ground, while the weather is something that happens to us. But the discovery of bioprecipitation shows that the biosphere and the atmosphere are one single breathing organism. The bacteria in the clouds are the unseen conductors of the sky's orchestra. It's a beautiful, humbling thought. Even in the middle of a massive, thundering storm, the most powerful players might be the ones you can't even see. Have you ever noticed how the air feels crisp and new right after a heavy rain? The smog is gone, the city smells fresh, and the colors of the leaves seem 5 times brighter. This isn't just your imagination. You are standing in a world that has just been through a deep cycle power wash. Rain is the Earth's primary method of cleaning the very air we breathe. The process is scientifically known as coalescence and scavenging. As a raindrop falls through the sky, it acts like a tiny, liquid magnet. Because of its surface tension and its slight electrical charge, it attracts aerosols, tiny particles of soot, smoke, dust, and pollutants that are suspended in the air. As the billions of drops fall, they collide with these particles, trapping them inside the drop and dragging them down to the ground. This washes the atmosphere. In many industrial cities, a single hour of heavy rain can reduce the concentration of airborne pollutants by up to 50% or more. This is why the world looks so much sharper after a storm. The haze of dust and pollution that usually blurs our vision has literally been hammered into the soil. Without rain, our atmosphere would eventually become a thick, suffocating soup of particles that would make breathing difficult and dim the sun. Rain doesn't just water the plants, it clears the windows of the world. We often view rain as gloomy, but in reality, it is the most optimistic thing in nature. It is a reset button. Every time it rains, the planet is taking a deep breath and wiping its face clean. It's a physical manifestation of the idea that no matter how much dust or pollution we create in our lives, there is a natural process designed to wash it away and give us a fresh start. When you breathe in that post-rain air, you aren't just breathing oxygen. You're breathing the cleanest air you'll ever experience. Imagine you're walking down the street in a small village. The wind picks up, the sky turns a dark, bruised purple, and you prepare for a typical thunderstorm. But as the first drops hit the pavement, they don't splash, they thud. You look down and your heart skips a beat. The ground isn't covered in water. It's covered in hundreds of silver, flopping, gasping fish. This isn't a biblical plague or a scene from a surrealist movie. This is a real meteorological event that happens every single year in a town called Lloro, Honduras. The phenomenon of animal rain has been documented for centuries, involving everything from fish and frogs to, in rare and terrifying cases, spiders. While it sounds like a glitch in reality, the scientific explanation is rooted in a specific type of weather event called a waterspout. Think of a waterspout as a tornado that forms over a body of water. As the vortex spins at high speeds, it creates a powerful vacuum effect. If this vacuum passes over a shallow area of a lake or a bay, it can suck up thousands of small animals, fish or frogs, along with the water. These animals are then carried high into the cloud system and transported miles away by the storm's winds. Eventually, as the storm loses its energy and the wind speeds drop, gravity takes over. Because the animals are heavier than raindrops, they fall first. The result is a rain of creatures that often leaves local residents baffled and, in the case of the Hondurans, celebrating a miracle that provides a free harvest of fresh fish. There is a strange, chaotic beauty in this fact. It reminds us that the sky and the earth are not separate containers. They are constantly exchanging matter. It also highlights how humans interpret the bizarre. In Lloro, the Lluvia de Pex, rain of fish, is celebrated with a festival. What scientists see as a mechanical transport of biomass, the locals see as a gift from the heavens. It's a reminder that even the most startling anomalies of nature can be integrated into the fabric of our culture and joy. You're standing on the peak of a massive mountain range. To your left, you see a lush, emerald green forest, dripping with moisture and teeming with moss. To your right, just a few miles away, is a scorched, cracked desert where nothing but cacti survive. How can two completely different worlds exist side by side, separated only by a ridge of rock? You are standing on the edge of a rain shadow, a geographical invisible wall that dictates who gets to live and who has to thirst. This phenomenon is called orographic lift. When moist air from the ocean travels inland, it eventually hits a mountain range. The mountains act like a physical barrier. As the air is forced to climb the side of the mountain, the windward side, it cools down. Since cool air cannot hold as much moisture as warm air, it's forced to dump its water in the form of heavy rain or snow. This is why the ocean side of a mountain is always green and vibrant. However, by the time the air reaches the peak and begins to descend down the other side, the leeward side, it has been completely squeezed dry. As it goes down, it warms up again, becoming a thirsty wind that actually sucks moisture out of the ground. This creates a permanent shadow of dryness. The Sierra Nevada mountains in the US and the Himalayas in Asia are perfect examples. On one side, you have some of the wettest places on Earth. On the other, you have the Great Basin and the Tibetan Plateau, deserts created simply because the mountains stole their rain. The rain shadow is a metaphor for the unfairness of geography. It shows us that life isn't just about hard work or biology. It's about location. Entire civilizations have risen and fallen based on which side of the shadow they settled on. It's a humbling reminder that the Earth's physical structure, its bones, has the final say in where forests grow and where dust reigns. We are all just living in the spaces that the mountains allow to be wet. We've all complained about a rainy week. Maybe it rained for 7 days straight and you felt like you'd never see the sun again. But about 232 million years ago, the Earth went through a weather event that makes our longest storms look like a light mist. Imagine a rainstorm that started on a Monday and didn't stop for 2 million years. Welcome to the Carnian pluvial episode, the storm that paved the way for the age of the dinosaurs. The deep dive. Before this event, the Earth was largely a giant, arid desert inside the supercontinent of Pangaea. But a massive series of volcanic eruptions in what is now Western Canada and Alaska released a staggering amount of carbon dioxide into the atmosphere. This caused intense global warming, which led to massive evaporation from the oceans. The result was a total collapse of the dry climate. For a period of roughly 2 million years, it rained almost constantly. This wasn't just a light drizzle. It was a humid, tropical deluge that transformed the planet. The dry deserts turned into lush, swampy jungles. This massive environmental shift caused a reset of life on Earth. The old, lizard-like creatures that dominated the dry world couldn't handle the wetness and went extinct, while a new, resilient group of animals, the early dinosaurs, thrived in the new greenery. Without this 2 million year rainstorm, the T-Rex and the Brachiosaurus might never have evolved. This fact is a perspective shifter. We tend to view rain as a temporary weather event, but on a geological scale, rain is a sculptor of evolution. It reminds us that the normal climate we live in today is just a snapshot. Earth has a wild, volatile history where the sky can turn into a faucet that doesn't shut off for eons. We are the children of that ancient rain. Our very existence was triggered by a storm that wouldn't end. Look up at a big, fluffy white cumulus cloud, the kind that looks like a giant pile of cotton candy drifting lazily on a summer afternoon. It looks weightless, right? Like it's just a ghost made of air. But if I told you that the cloud you're looking at weighs more than a fully loaded Boeing 747, would you believe me? If I told you it actually weighs as much as 100 elephants, would you ever feel safe standing under it again? How does something that weighs 1.1 million pounds, 500,000 kilograms, stay suspended in the air? The answer is a beautiful dance of density and volume. A typical cumulus cloud is about 1 kilometer long and 1 kilometer tall. While the water droplets inside are heavy in total, they are spread out over a massive space. In fact, a cloud is actually less dense than the dry air surrounding it. Think of it like oil floating on water. The air beneath the cloud is warmer and more buoyant, creating an upward current that acts like an invisible hand, holding that million-pound mass of water aloft. It's only when the water droplets begin to collide and merge, a process called coalescence, that they become too heavy for the rising air to support. At that moment, the floating fortress begins to crumble, and those millions of pounds of water come crashing down as the rain we feel on our skin. We aren't just looking at vapor, we are looking at a suspended ocean. There is something deeply humbling about knowing that there are millions of tons of water hanging over our heads at any given moment. It reminds us that our eyes often deceive us. We see lightness and softness where there is actually massive power and weight. Teaches us that balance is everything. As long as the upward push of the warm earth matches the downward pull of the cold water, the world stays in harmony. It's a delicate, invisible equilibrium that keeps us dry until it doesn't. From the indigenous tribes of North America to the dry plains of Africa and the ancient temples of China, humans have done something very strange for thousands of years. They have danced for the rain. To a modern scientist, dancing to change the weather seems irrational. But if it doesn't work, why has every major civilization on Earth done it? Is it possible that the rain dance wasn't actually about the clouds, but about the people beneath them? Anthropologists have studied rain-making rituals for decades. In many cultures, like the Hopi or the Zuni, these dances were incredibly complex, involving specific costumes, rhythms, and community participation. While these rituals obviously don't have a direct physical effect on atmospheric pressure or moisture levels, they serve a vital socio-psychological function. During a drought, a community is under extreme stress. Panic leads to conflict. By organizing a rain dance, the community is brought together in a singular, focused action. It reduces anxiety, provides a sense of agency, the feeling that you are doing something rather than just waiting to die, and strengthens social bonds. Interestingly, because these dances were often performed during the rainy season, when a drought was most likely to break anyway, the rain eventually would fall, reinforcing the belief in the ritual. It is a perfect example of a feedback loop between human hope and natural cycles. The rain dance is a testament to the human spirit's refusal to give up. When we are faced with a power as vast and uncaring as the weather, we don't just hide in caves. We dress up, we sing, and we stomp our feet. We demand to be heard by the sky. Whether or not the rain falls because of the dance is almost secondary to the fact that the dance keeps the tribe together. It's a reminder that sometimes the things we do to survive are as much about our hearts as they are about our biology. If you ask anyone to name the rainiest city in the world, they'll probably say London. We have this mental image of a Londoner in a trench coat, holding a black umbrella against a backdrop of gray fog. But here's the truth that might upset your travel plans. London is actually quite dry. In fact, Rome, Sydney, and even New York City all get more total rainfall per year than London. So why does the rainy London myth persist? Because in the world of rain, it's not about how much falls. It's about how long it takes to fall. London receives roughly 23 inches, 584 millimeters of rain a year. Compare that to Miami, Florida, which gets about 62 inches. Yet, we don't think of Miami as a gloomy rain city. The difference is intensity and frequency. In a tropical city, the rain comes in a violent, dramatic burst, an hour of heavy thunder, and then the sun comes back out. London, however, specializes in drizzle. It has more rainy days, about 106 a year, where the sky stays a flat, milky white, and a fine mist falls for 8 hours straight. It's a slow, psychological soak rather than a quick physical drenching. This is why the reputation exists. London feels rainier because the rain lingers. It's the difference between being hit by a bucket of water and being trapped in a humid steam room. The total volume of water is less, but the grayness is constant. This fact tells us a lot about how we perceive our environment. Our memories aren't built on data, they are built on moods. A city that gets a lot of water but stays sunny feels productive, while a city that gets very little water but stays cloudy feels melancholy. It reminds us that our experience of the world is subjective. The rain isn't just a measurement on a gauge. It's a vibe, a feeling, and a coat of paint on our day. When we think of a rainstorm on Earth, we think of renewal. We think of washing our cars or the smell of wet grass. But if you were standing on our sister planet, Venus, you wouldn't be reaching for an umbrella. You'd be reaching for a lead-lined bunker. On Venus, it doesn't rain water. It rains sulfuric acid so concentrated it could eat through steel. But there's a twist. On Venus, the rain is a ghost that never actually touches the ground. Venus is a runaway greenhouse nightmare. Its atmosphere is so thick and hot that the surface temperature stays around 464 degrees Celsius, 867 degrees Fahrenheit, hot enough to melt lead. High in the upper atmosphere, about 30 to 40 miles up, the pressure and temperature allow for the formation of clouds made of sulfuric acid. As these droplets grow heavy, they begin to fall just like rain on Earth. However, because the lower atmosphere of Venus is such an oven, something incredible happens. As the acid rain descends, the heat becomes so intense that the droplets evaporate midair before they can ever hit the surface. This creates a phenomenon called virga on a planetary scale. The acid turns back into a gas, rises, and recondenses in the upper clouds. Even though it's raining constantly, the surface of Venus remains a bone-dry, scorching wasteland of volcanic rock. The sky is a perpetual cycle of falling acid that vanishes into thin air. This fact is a stark reminder of how fine-tuned our own planet is. We often take our gentle water cycle for granted, but a few shifts in atmospheric chemistry and a little too much CO2 could turn our life-giving rain into a corrosive ghost. Venus is a cautionary tale written in the sky. It shows us that rain isn't always a gift. In the wrong environment, it's a terrifying display of chemical warfare that never ends. In the modern world, we treat rain as a waste product. It hits our roofs, flows into our gutters, and is whisked away into sewers as quickly as possible. But for our ancestors, a single raindrop was a piece of gold. In the deserts of Rajasthan or the mountains of Peru, people didn't just wait for rain. They built massive, intricate stone cathedrals just to catch it and hold it for a year. They understood that rain is the only true currency of survival. Ancient rainwater harvesting was an architectural marvel. Take, for example, the Chand Bauri in India, a 13-story deep stepwell built over 1,000 years ago. It consists of 3,500 narrow steps in a perfect symmetrical pattern, leading down to a pool of water. It was designed to catch every drop of monsoon rain and keep it cool and shaded from the brutal sun. In the Andes, the Inca civilization built amunas, canals that intercepted rainwater high in the mountains and diverted it into the porous volcanic rock. The rock acted as a natural sponge, slowing the water down so that it would emerge in springs lower down the mountain months later during the dry season. These weren't just pits in the ground. They were sophisticated engineering projects that synchronized human life with the erratic pulse of the sky. They turned the flood of a single month into a trickle that lasted 12. There is a profound lesson in how these ancient cultures viewed the rain. To them, rain was a guest that needed to be invited in and cared for. In our world of on-demand everything, we've lost that connection. Learning about these stepwells and ancient canals reminds us that we are part of a cycle. It challenges us to stop viewing rain as an inconvenience to be drained away and start viewing it as a resource to be respected and stored. Have you ever noticed how, right before a storm, the birds go quiet and the insects seem to vanish? You might think they're just hiding from the wetness, but it's actually more complex than that. For an insect, a raindrop is like a falling boulder. But before those boulders start falling, the rain sends out a telegram. It uses the air itself to tell every beetle, bee, and butterfly in the forest that it's time to seek shelter. When humidity rises right before a rainstorm, it changes how scents travel through the air. This is partly due to the petrichor we discussed earlier, but it's also about barometric pressure. Many insects have specialized sensors on their antennae that can detect minute drops in air pressure. When the pressure falls, it's a signal that a storm is imminent. Furthermore, moisture in the air traps pheromones, the chemical signals insects use to find mates or food. In heavy, pre-rain air, these scents become localized and intense. However, for many species, the drop in pressure triggers a shutdown response. Research has shown that beetles and moths will stop their mating rituals and focus entirely on finding the underside of a leaf. Why? Because a single raindrop can weigh 50 times as much as a small insect. Being hit by a raindrop in mid-flight is the equivalent of a human being hit by a water balloon the size of a refrigerator. The rain isn't just a weather change, it's a life or death navigation hazard. It's fascinating to realize that while we are busy looking at our weather apps, the entire animal kingdom is reading the air. There is a whole conversation happening in the vibrations and sense of the atmosphere that we are completely deaf to. It humbles us to know that a tiny beetle on a leaf might have a more intimate and urgent relationship with the coming storm than we ever will. We have this romantic image of rain as the purest substance on earth. We see characters in movies tilt their heads back and drink the falling drops as if they're tasting a miracle. We use rainwater as a marketing term for skin creams and bottled drinks. But if you actually analyzed a single drop of rain in a laboratory, you might be surprised to find it's less of a pure gift and more of a chemical soup. Every time it rains, the sky is effectively dumping a mystery box of the world's trash onto your head. Rainwater is technically distilled water. It evaporates as pure \BM H_20. However, the moment that vapor begins to condense, the purity ends. As we've discussed, rain needs a seed of dust or bacteria to form. But as it falls through the miles of atmosphere between the cloud and your face, it acts as a high-speed chemical scrubber. Rain absorbs carbon dioxide from the air, which turns the water slightly acidic, carbonic acid. It picks up nitrogen and sulfur oxides from car exhausts and factory chimneys, which can create acid rain in high concentrations. But it doesn't stop there. Recent studies have found that rainwater now frequently contains forever chemicals, or PFAS, and polyfluoroalkyl substances. These are man-made chemicals used in non-stick pans and waterproof clothing that have now entered the global water cycle. Even in the most remote parts of Antarctica or the peaks of the Himalayas, the rain is no longer pure. It carries the microscopic fingerprints of human industry, salt from the spray of distant oceans, and even tiny fragments of microplastics that have been swept up by the wind. This fact is a bit of a wake-up call. It reminds us that there is no away. When we pollute the air or the land, we aren't just making a mess in one spot. We are poisoning the very system that brings us life. The rain is a mirror of our planet's health. If the rain is dirty, it's because the world it passed through is dirty. It forces us to realize that our relationship with the sky is reciprocal. We give the sky our smoke and our chemicals, and eventually, the sky gives them back to us in a glass of water. Today, an umbrella is a cheap, boring object. It's something you buy for $5 at a drugstore and inevitably leave on a bus. But for most of human history, carrying an umbrella was the equivalent of driving a Rolls-Royce. It was a symbol of absolute power, religious divinity, and royal blood. In fact, for centuries, if you were a commoner caught holding an umbrella, you weren't just protecting yourself from the rain. You were committing a crime against the social order. The umbrella didn't actually start as a tool for rain. It started as a parasol for the sun. The word itself comes from the Latin umbra, meaning shade. In ancient Egypt, Mesopotamia, and China, the ability to create your own personal patch of shade was a mark of high status. It meant you didn't have to work in the fields. You were someone for whom the sun itself was an inconvenience. It wasn't until the 16th century in Europe that the umbrella began to be waterproofed with wax or oil to handle the rain. Even then, it was considered a strictly feminine accessory. Men who used umbrellas were mocked for being effeminate or too weak to handle a little weather. Englishmen were expected to just use a carriage or get wet. It wasn't until a man named Jonas Hanway carried an umbrella every day in London for 30 years, braving the insults and stones thrown by carriage drivers who feared umbrellas would put them out of business, that it became socially acceptable for men. Hanway's persistence turned a royal luxury into a universal tool for the common person. The story of the umbrella is the story of democracy. It's about how a tool of the elite was eventually claimed by everyone. It also shows how stubborn we are about our traditions. Imagine being so concerned with looking tough that you'd rather get soaked to the bone than carry a piece of cloth on a stick. Next time you open your umbrella, remember Hanway and the ancient kings. You're holding a piece of technology that was once reserved only for the gods. Meteorologists are the fortune tellers of the modern age. They use multi-million-dollar Doppler radar systems to see storms coming from hundreds of miles away. But sometimes, the radar sees something terrifying. A massive, heavy rainstorm heading straight for a city. The screen turns bright red, the alarms go off, and the warnings are sent out. But when people look out their windows, the sky is blue. There isn't a cloud in sight. These are ghost storms, and they prove that sometimes the rain we see isn't rain at all. Radar works by bouncing microwave pulses off objects in the sky. If the pulse hits a raindrop, it bounces back, and the computer calculates how much rain is there based on the signal strength. However, radar can be easily fooled. There are several things that look like heavy rain to a computer but are actually something else entirely. One common culprit is biological chaff. This happens when millions of birds or insects take flight at the same time. During the migration of the lady beetle or certain species of dragonflies, the swarm can be so dense that the radar interprets it as a massive thunderstorm. Another ghost is caused by atmospheric refraction, where the radar beam gets bent toward the ground and bounces off the earth instead of the sky, creating the illusion of a stationary, eternal storm. Meteorologists have to be trained to distinguish between a wet storm and a living one, or they risk calling for a flood when the only thing falling is a few million ladybugs. There is something incredibly cool about the idea of a ghost storm. It reminds us that even our most advanced technology has a blind spot. It shows that the world is more crowded and complex than we think. While we are looking for water to fall from the sky, there are entire civilizations of insects and birds moving through the air, so vast and thick that they mimic the power of a hurricane. It teaches us to always verify our data with our own eyes, because sometimes the storm on the screen is actually just a beautiful, massive migration of life. We've all had those weeks where it feels like it's been raining forever. You start to forget what the sun looks like, and your shoes never quite dry out. But imagine a rainstorm that didn't just last for a week or a month or even a year. Imagine a storm that started on a Tuesday and didn't stop for 2 million years. This isn't a hyperbolic myth. It is a geological fact known as the Carnian pluvial episode. It was the storm that literally gave birth to the age of the dinosaurs. About 232 million years ago, during the Triassic period, the Earth was a giant, arid desert. Most of the land was clumped into the supercontinent Pangaea, and it was hot, dry, and harsh. But then, a massive series of volcanic eruptions in what is now Western North America began pumping staggering amounts of carbon dioxide into the atmosphere. This triggered a runaway greenhouse effect. The oceans heated up, evaporation went into overdrive, and the sky finally broke. For the next 2 million years, the Earth experienced a relentless, humid deluge. This wasn't just a wet season. It was a global transformation. The dry, scrubby landscapes were replaced by lush, swampy jungles. This massive environmental shift caused a faunal turnover. Many of the dominant land animals of the time couldn't adapt to the humidity and the new plant life and went extinct. In their place, a small, fringe group of animals that were better at navigating wet environments began to flourish. These were the early dinosaurs. Without this 2 million-year rainstorm, the giants like Brachiosaurus and T-Rex might never have had the evolutionary opening they needed to take over the world. It's hard for the human mind to grasp the scale of 2 million years of rain. Our entire recorded history is barely a blink in that storm. It teaches us that rain isn't just weather. It's a sculptor of life. We often think of the world as a static place that we live in, but the Carnian pluvial episode reminds us that the sky can fundamentally rewrite the rules of the planet whenever it wants. We are only here because millions of years ago, the clouds decided not to stop. When a raindrop hits a puddle, it looks simple, just a little plop and a ripple. But if you were to shrink down to the size of an ant and watch that impact in slow motion, you wouldn't see a simple splash. You would see a violent, high-speed explosion that mimics a nuclear mushroom cloud. This tiny explosion is the reason why we can smell the rain coming from miles away. The raindrop isn't just falling. It's launching 1,000 microscopic rockets into the air. High-speed cameras have revealed that when a raindrop hits a porous surface, like soil or concrete, it traps tiny bubbles of air at the point of impact. Because the water is moving so fast, those bubbles are compressed and then burst upward. This process is called aerosolization. As these bubbles pop, they shoot tiny jets of water droplets, aerosols, into the air at incredible speeds. These aerosols carry the scent of the earth, the oils from plants and the chemicals from soil bacteria, and disperse them into the wind. This is how the smell of rain travels faster than the storm itself. You aren't smelling the rain in the clouds. You are smelling the ghosts of the raindrops that hit the ground miles away, carried to your nose by these micro-explosions. If rain fell on a perfectly non-porous, smooth surface, we would hardly smell it at all. The earth has to breathe back at the rain for the scent to exist. There is something beautiful about the idea that every raindrop is a messenger. It doesn't just hit the ground and disappear. It announces its arrival by launching a tiny bouquet of scents into the sky. It reminds us that even the smallest actions have a splash effect that reaches much farther than the point of impact. Next time you smell that pre-rain earthiness, think of the billions of tiny bubbles popping all across the horizon, just to tell you that the water is on its way. We usually think of earthquakes as deep tectonic mysteries, the result of giant plates of rock grinding together miles beneath our feet. We think of the sky and the ground as two totally different systems. But in places like the Himalayas or the mountains of Taiwan, the sky and the ground are in a dangerous dialogue. In these regions, a heavy enough rainstorm can actually be the finger that pulls the trigger on a massive earthquake. The sky doesn't just bring water, it brings enough weight to crack the crust of the earth. This phenomenon is known as hydroseismicity. It happens in two ways. First, there is the sheer weight. During a monsoon, billions of tons of water are dumped onto a specific geographic area in a very short time. This immense load puts physical pressure on the tectonic fault lines below. It's like putting a heavy weight on a spring that is already coiled tight. Eventually, the spring snaps. Second, there is the lubrication effect. As rainwater seeps deep into the Earth's crust, sometimes miles down, it increases the fluid pressure within the cracks of the rocks. This pore pressure acts like grease on a rusty hinge. If a fault line is already under high stress and stuck, the sudden injection of high-pressure rainwater can allow the rocks to slide past each other more easily. Studies in the Himalayas have shown that micro-earthquakes actually peak during the monsoon season. The rain isn't creating the tectonic energy, but it is acting as the final nudge that releases it. This fact is a bit terrifying because it breaks down the walls we've built between the safe sky and the solid ground. It reminds us that everything is connected. A cloud is not just a light, fluffy thing. It is a massive reservoir of potential energy that can influence the very foundations of our world. It teaches us a lesson in humility. We live on a planet where even a gentle rain, if there's enough of it, can make the mountains tremble. We've talked about fish falling from the sky and we've talked about red rain. But there is a phenomenon that is the literal definition of a nightmare for anyone with arachnophobia. Imagine looking up and seeing millions of tiny, silver threads drifting down from the clouds, and at the end of every thread is a living, crawling spider. In places like Australia and Brazil, spider rain isn't a horror movie. It's a survival strategy that turns the sky into a silk highway. This isn't actually a meteorological mistake, like fish being sucked up by a tornado. This is a deliberate biological process called ballooning. When certain species of spiders experience overpopulation or a change in weather, they climb to the highest point they can find. A fence post, a tall blade of grass, or a tree branch. They then tilt their abdomens into the air and release several strands of silk. Because spider silk is so light and has a slight static charge, it catches the Earth's natural electric field and the slightest breeze. The spider is lifted into the air and can travel for hundreds of miles, even reaching altitudes of 16,000 feet. When millions of spiders do this at once, it looks like a shimmering silver rain. Eventually, when the wind dies down or the silk becomes heavy with moisture from a coming storm, they all descend at once. Entire towns have been covered in a thick, white carpet of angel hair, silk in a single afternoon. It is a mass migration through the atmosphere, proving that the sky is much more crowded with life than we realize. While the idea of millions of spiders falling on your head is enough to make anyone run for cover, there is something awe-inspiring about the engineering of it. A tiny creature with no wings has figured out how to use the physics of the atmosphere to travel across continents. It reminds us that rain isn't always about water. Sometimes, it's about the incredible ways life finds to move across the planet. It's a lesson in resilience. If you don't like where you are, just spin a thread and let the sky take you somewhere new. In some of the harshest deserts on Earth, like the Atacama in Chile or Death Valley in California, the ground looks like a graveyard. It's cracked, bone dry, and seemingly dead. Years can go by without a single drop of moisture. But the desert isn't dead. It's just sleeping. It's waiting for a trigger, a specific, heavy rainstorm that acts like a key turning in a lock. When that rain finally hits, the gray wasteland transforms into a sea of purple, gold, and pink in a matter of hours. This is the super bloom, and it is the most dramatic resurrection in the natural world. The seeds of desert wildflowers are evolutionary masterpieces. They are covered in a thick, protective coating of chemicals called germination inhibitors. These chemicals ensure the seed won't sprout if there's only a light drizzle, which wouldn't be enough water for the plant to survive its full life cycle. The seed is counting the rain. Only when a heavy, soaking rain falls, usually at least an inch or more, are these chemical inhibitors washed away. Once the lock is broken, the seed enters a frantic race against time. Because the desert sun will soon return to bake the ground, the plants grow, bloom, and produce new seeds in a hyper-compressed window of a few weeks. The result is a carpet of flowers so dense that it can be seen from space. It is a biological explosion triggered entirely by the chemistry of a single rainstorm. The super bloom is a powerful metaphor for patience and potential. It tells us that just because something looks barren doesn't mean it is empty. There are dreams and lives tucked just beneath the surface of the dry parts of our lives, waiting for the right moment to emerge. It teaches us that the rain isn't just about survival. It's about the beauty that comes when we finally get what we've been waiting for. It's the Earth's way of showing us that even the longest drought has an end. We know there's no water on the moon, no clouds, no atmosphere, no gentle spring showers. So, you can imagine the surprise of the Apollo astronauts when they looked at their lunar lander and saw what appeared to be raindrops on the surface. How can it rain on a world with no air? As it turns out, the moon does have rain, but it's not made of water. It's made of high-speed, microscopic shards of glass and rock that have been falling for billions of years. Because the moon has no atmosphere to act as a shield, it is constantly bombarded by micrometeoroids, tiny specks of space dust traveling at tens of thousands of miles per hour. When these specks hit the lunar surface, the heat of the impact melts the soil, turning it into tiny glass beads. At the same time, the impact kicks up a spray of dust. Over eons, this process creates a gardening effect on the lunar surface. This constant rain of dust and glass, combined with the solar wind, a stream of charged particles from the sun, creates a strange electrostatic environment. During the lunar sunrise, astronauts observed a horizon glow, which scientists believe is caused by lunar dust particles becoming electrically charged and levitating off the ground. It's a dry, jagged, and dangerous version of rain. These particles are so sharp that they ate through the outer layers of the Apollo spacesuits like sandpaper. The rain of the moon is a reminder of how lucky we are to have an atmosphere. On Earth, our air burns up these micrometeoroids, turning a deadly rain of glass into beautiful shooting stars. The moon is raw and exposed, a place where the weather is a constant barrage of cosmic debris. It makes our earthly rain, even the cold, gray, miserable kind, feel like a luxury. It teaches us that protection is often invisible until you go somewhere that doesn't have it. Close your eyes and imagine the sound of a gentle rain on a tin roof. That rhythmic pitter-patter is one of the most relaxing sounds in nature. We use it for sleep machines and lo-fi study beats. But here's a secret that will change how you hear the next storm. The sound of rain isn't the sound of water hitting a surface. You aren't hearing the thud of the liquid. You are hearing the scream of tiny, trapped air bubbles. The deep dive. For decades, scientists thought the sound of a raindrop hitting water was caused by the impact itself. But using ultra-sensitive hydrophones and high-speed cameras, researchers at the University of Cambridge discovered something far more intricate. When a raindrop hits a body of water, it creates a small cavity, a tiny bowl in the surface. As the cavity collapses, it traps a tiny bubble of air underneath the surface. This bubble is under immense pressure and begins to vibrate at a high frequency. It is this oscillation of the trapped air bubble that creates the characteristic ping or plop sound. If you could prevent the bubble from forming, the rain would be almost silent. Every time you hear a rainstorm, you are actually listening to billions of microscopic air bells ringing all at once. The pitch of the sound depends entirely on the size of the bubble. Larger drops create larger bubbles and deeper tones, while a fine mist creates a high-pitched, white noise hiss. The human touch. There is something deeply poetic about the idea that rain sings through the air it traps. It's a reminder that beauty often comes from the interaction between two different things, in this case, water and air. We find the sound relaxing because it is a pink noise, a frequency that mimics the rhythms of our own heartbeats and brainwaves. It teaches us that even in a chaotic storm, there is a hidden, rhythmic music being played, provided you know where the instrument is hidden. Have you ever noticed how quiet the world feels during a rainstorm? It's not just that people are staying inside. It's as if the world has been wrapped in a thick, wet blanket. You can't hear the distant highway. The hum of the city feels muffled, and your own voice sounds different. This isn't just a feeling. Rain is a physical acoustic filter that cleans the noise of our lives, acting as a massive, planetary ear cleaner. Rain influences sound through a process called scattering and absorption. As sound waves travel through the air, they usually move in a relatively straight line. However, during a rainstorm, they are forced to navigate a minefield of billions of falling liquid spheres. Each raindrop acts as a tiny obstacle that reflects, refracts, and scatters the sound waves. Lower frequency sounds, like the rumble of a truck, get broken up by the density of the rain. Furthermore, the high humidity that comes with rain makes the air heavy. Moist air is actually less dense than dry air because water vapor molecules are lighter than nitrogen and oxygen. But the presence of actual liquid drops creates a medium that absorbs sound energy. The rain effectively eats the background noise of human civilization, leaving behind only the localized, soothing frequency of the water itself. This is why a forest in the rain feels like a cathedral. The rain has silenced the outside world to let you hear the immediate moment. In our modern, noisy world, silence is a luxury. We are constantly bombarded by the sonic pollution of engines, electronics, and crowds. Rain is the only time nature steps in and hits the mute button for us. It gives us a rare moment of acoustic privacy. It reminds us that sometimes, to hear the important things, like our own thoughts or the wind in the trees, we need the sky to wash away the noise. Why do we have a natural urge to splash in puddles? Why is singing in the rain one of the most iconic moments in cinema history? You'd think an animal designed for survival would hate being wet and cold. But there is a hidden chemical reaction that happens in the air during a storm that actually makes us feel a sense of euphoria. The rain isn't just watering the grass. It's literally medicating your brain. This phenomenon is tied to negative ionization. When water is broken apart, like a raindrop shattering against the pavement or a waterfall crashing into a pool, it creates a massive amount of negative ions. These are oxygen atoms charged with an extra electron. When we breathe in these negative ions, they enter our bloodstream and are believed to produce biochemical reactions that increase levels of the mood chemical serotonin. This helps alleviate depression, relieve stress, and boost our daytime energy. This is the freshness you feel in the air after a storm. While the gray sky might look gloomy, your body is physically responding to an invisible chemical up that the rain is providing. Combine this with the rhythmic sound of the air bubbles we discussed earlier, and you have a perfect natural recipe for relaxation and joy. This fact bridges the gap between science and emotion. It tells us that our joy in the rain isn't childish, it's biological. We are hardwired to feel a sense of relief when the sky breaks. It's as if the earth is giving us a collective pat on the back, telling us to relax. Next time you feel like dancing in a downpour, don't hold back. Your brain is literally designed to enjoy the chemistry of the storm. Imagine standing in the middle of a desert, looking up at a dark, heavy cloud that is clearly dumping a massive curtain of water. You can see the gray streaks reaching for the ground. You prepare for the soaking of a lifetime, and then nothing. You remain bone dry. The sky is raining, but the earth isn't getting wet. You are witnessing Virga, the phantom rain that dies before it can ever be born. The deep dive. Virga occurs when precipitation falls from a cloud but evaporates or sublimes before it reaches the surface. This happens when the rain passes through a layer of extremely dry or intensely hot air. As the liquid droplets hit this wall of heat, they turn back into invisible water vapor. In the American Southwest, you can see Virga as long, wispy jellyfish tentacles hanging from the bottoms of clouds. While it looks peaceful from a distance, Virga is actually a sign of atmospheric violence. As the water evaporates, it absorbs heat from the surrounding air. This causes the air to become much colder and denser than the air around it. This heavy, cold air then crashes toward the ground in what is known as a dry microburst. These invisible winds can reach speeds of over 100 miles per hour, capable of knocking over trees or endangering aircraft, all while the ground remains completely dry. It is a reminder that the most dangerous part of a storm isn't always the water you can see, but the invisible physics of the air, the human touch. There is something deeply poetic and slightly tragic about Virga. It represents effort without result, a cloud giving everything it has to the earth, only for the atmosphere to steal the gift away at the last second. It teaches us that the journey is just as important as the destination. Sometimes the rain in our lives is happening, even if we can't feel it on our skin yet. It's a visual representation of the invisible struggles that happen every day in the sky above our heads. When you drive down a smooth, paved highway today, you probably don't think about a rainstorm. But the very shape of the road beneath your tires, the slight curve that slopes down toward the edges, is a design that was perfected over thousands of years for one single reason: to defeat the rain. We didn't build roads for cars. We built them to survive the sky. The deep dive. The greatest enemy of any road isn't heavy traffic. It's standing water. Water is a universal solvent. It seeps into cracks, freezes, expands, and shatters the foundation of the earth. Ancient Roman engineers were the first to master the camber. They realized that if a road was perfectly flat, rain would pool in the center, turn the soil to mud, and swallow the stones. Roman roads were built with a crown in the middle, sloping downward to deep stone-lined gutters on either side. This ensured that every raindrop was immediately whisked away from the driving surface. This basic principle, drainage above all else, is still the gold standard of modern civil engineering. Even our most advanced asphalt mixes are designed to be porous, so that rain can flow through the top layer and out to the sides. We think of roads as static objects, but they are actually complex water management systems. Every street in your city is a carefully calculated battleground designed to keep the rain from reclaiming the land. The human touch. This fact connects our daily commute to the ancient past. It reminds us that humanity's greatest achievements are often just clever ways of dealing with the weather. We often feel like we've conquered nature with our concrete and steel, but the curve of a road is a silent admission that the rain is still in charge. It's a lesson in design. Don't fight the force, direct it. In 2015, residents across Washington, Oregon, and Idaho walked outside after a light rainstorm to find their cars covered in something terrifying. It looked like someone had dumped buckets of watered-down milk over the entire Pacific Northwest. It wasn't clear. It was a chalky, milky white. For days, people feared a chemical attack or a strange biological fallout. This was the legendary milk rain, and its origin was a mystery that stretched back to a dry lake bed hundreds of miles away. The deep dive. Milk rain is a rare but spectacular example of how rain acts as a planetary vacuum cleaner. In the case of the 2015 event, scientists eventually traced the milk back to a shallow, alkaline lake in a remote part of Oregon called Summer Lake. During a particularly dry spell, the water level dropped, exposing a fine, white silt rich in calcium carbonate, the same stuff found in chalk. A massive windstorm kicked this white dust high into the atmosphere, where it met a developing storm system. As the raindrops formed, they scavenged the white dust, turning each drop into a tiny splash of liquid chalk. When it finally fell, it left a white, milky residue on everything it touched. Similar phenomena have occurred with blood rain, red dust from the Sahara, and yellow rain, pollen from pine forests. It proves that the rain you see is never just water. It is a liquid record of the geography the wind has touched. The human touch. The milk rain reminds us that the earth is a small, connected place. A dusty lake in the middle of nowhere can change the color of the day for millions of people in a distant city. It breaks down the idea of local weather. We are all breathing and getting rained on by the same rotating pool of dust, water, and history. It turns a simple rainstorm into a global detective story, where the clues are written in the spots on your windshield. We have a very simple relationship with rain. It falls down. Gravity pulls it from the clouds to the earth. It's the most predictable direction in nature. But if you were standing on the edge of the cliffs of Moher in Ireland or the waterfalls of the Faroe Islands during a storm, you might see something that breaks your brain. You would see the rain, massive, heavy sheets of it, tearing away from the clouds and flying straight back up into the sky. This is updraft rain, and it's a moment where the wind decides it's stronger than gravity. The deep dive. This phenomenon is a spectacular display of fluid dynamics. When strong, gale-force winds hit a vertical obstacle like a massive sea cliff, the wind has nowhere to go but up. This creates a powerful, concentrated updraft. If a rainstorm is happening at the same time, the force of this rising air can exceed the terminal velocity of the falling raindrops. Instead of landing, the raindrops are caught in this vertical wind tunnel and blasted back toward the clouds. To an observer standing near the edge, it looks like the ocean is falling upward or the sky is being vacuumed. In extreme cases, this can even happen with waterfalls, where the entire stream of water is caught by the wind and sprayed into the air like a giant's misting fan. It serves as a reminder that laws like gravity are always in a tug-of-war with other forces, and sometimes, for a few seconds, the wind wins the fight. The human touch, seeing rain fall upward, is a surreal, magical experience. It reminds us that our perspective is limited by our daily routines. We assume the world works one way because that's how we see it 99% of the time. But nature loves to find the exceptions. It's a lesson in flexibility. Even something as certain as what goes up must come down can be reversed if the right energy is applied. It challenges us to look for the updrafts in our own lives that can turn a fall into a flight. Deep in the world's great deserts, there is a sound that has terrified travelers for millennia. It's a low, haunting hum, like a choir of monks or a distant airplane engine, coming from the sand dunes themselves. They call it the singing sands. For a long time, people thought it was spirits or ghosts. But the secret to the song of the desert isn't just the sand. It's the rain. The sand can only sing because of a very specific relationship it has with moisture. The deep dive. To create the song, sand grains must be of a similar size, rounded, and contain silica. But the most important factor is the relative humidity. When rain falls in the desert, it does more than just wet the surface. It changes the friction between the grains. As the dunes dry out, a thin layer of moisture remains trapped between the sand particles. When sand avalanches occur, often triggered by wind, the grains slide over each other. The moisture acts as a microscopic lubricant and an acoustic resonator. As the grains vibrate, the moisture helps synchronize those vibrations, turning a chaotic crunch into a pure, sustained tone. If the sand is too wet, the song is muffled into a dull thud. If it's too dry, the grains don't have enough friction to vibrate correctly. The singing is the desert's way of breathing out the last of the rain's influence. It is a massive, natural musical instrument played by the ghost of a storm. The human touch. The singing sands remind us that the most beautiful things in nature are often the result of perfect timing. It requires the right sand, the right wind, and the right amount of rain. It teaches us about the sweet spot in life, the balance between being too dry and too saturated. It's a reminder that even the quietest, most barren places on Earth have a voice, provided the sky gives them the right notes to play. How much did it rain last night? You might say a lot or not much, but to a scientist, that's not enough. They want a number, We've been trying to put a number on the sky for over 2,000 years. The first rain gauges weren't high-tech sensors. They were simple bowls used by ancient kings to decide how much to tax their farmers. The history of the rain gauge is actually the history of how we learned to turn the weather into data. The deep dive. The earliest recorded rain gauges date back to ancient India around 400 BC and later in Korea in the 1400s. These early chuggi were standardized bronze containers used to measure rainfall across the kingdom. Why? Because rainfall equaled crop yield, and crop yield equaled wealth. By measuring the rain, the government could predict how much food would be produced and set taxes accordingly. Today, we use tipping bucket rain gauges. Imagine a tiny seesaw with two small buckets. When one bucket fills with exactly 0.01 inches of rain, it tips over, empties, and sends an electrical pulse to a computer, while the other bucket moves into place. This allows us to measure not just how much rain fell, but the intensity of the storm. We have moved from using rain to tax people to using rain to save them, as this data now feeds into flood warning systems that protect millions of people globally. The human touch. There is something uniquely human about wanting to measure the infinite sky. It's our way of trying to find order in the chaos. We take a massive, sprawling storm that covers 3 states, and we boil it down to a single number, 0.5 inches. It reminds us of our desire for certainty. But even with all our gauges and sensors, the rain still has a way of surprising us. It's a lesson in the limits of data. We can measure the water, but we can never truly measure the majesty of the storm. In the high, freezing peaks of the Andes or the Himalayas, there is a type of rain that is a master of disguise. You see the clouds, you see the frozen crystals beginning to fall, but they never hit the ground as water, and they don't even evaporate as vapor. They simply disappear. This is the magic of sublimation, where the rain skips an entire state of matter just to avoid touching the earth. The deep dive. Sublimation is a thermodynamic process where a substance transitions directly from a solid, ice or snow, to a gas, vapor, without ever becoming a liquid. In extremely cold and dry environments, the air is so thirsty for moisture, and the pressure is so low that a falling snowflake or an ice pellet doesn't have the time or the temperature to melt. As the frozen rain falls through these dry layers of the atmosphere, the ice molecules absorb energy from the sun and vibrate so violently that they break free from their solid structure and fly off into the air as gas. This creates a phantom precipitation. From a distance, it looks like a snowstorm, but if you were standing at the base of the mountain, you would feel nothing but a dry, cold wind. This process is vital for the Earth's water balance in polar regions, as it allows moisture to return to the atmosphere without contributing to glacial meltwater. It is the sky's way of reclaiming its bounty before it ever pays its debt to the land. The human touch. Sublimation is a lesson in the unseen. It reminds us that just because we don't see a result, the wet ground, doesn't mean a process, the falling rain, didn't happen. It's a metaphor for those efforts in our lives that seem to vanish into thin air before they can yield a result. But in the grand cycle of the planet, that vanished water is still part of the system. It's just changing form to be used somewhere else. It teaches us that nothing is truly lost. It's just rearranged. If you walk through the leaf litter of a tropical forest in Central America during a dry spell, you might see nothing but brown, crunchy leaves. But the moment the first heavy raindrop hits the ground, the earth starts to scream. Thousands of tiny, balloon-like creatures emerge from the dirt, chirping and whistling in a deafening chorus. These are rain frogs, and they are the only animals on Earth that have tied their entire biological existence to the specific vibration of a rainstorm. The deep dive. Rain frogs, particularly those in the genus Pristimantis, have a unique evolutionary trait. They don't have a tadpole stage. While most amphibians need standing water like a pond or a lake to lay eggs, rain frogs lay their eggs in damp soil or among leaves. This makes them incredibly vulnerable to dry air. To survive, they spend the majority of their lives buried underground in a state of estivation, a summer version of hibernation. They are equipped with highly sensitive skin that can detect the specific seismic vibrations of raindrops hitting the soil from inches above. When the rain starts, it's a signal that the humidity is high enough for them to breathe and move without drying out. They emerge in a frantic burst of energy to eat, mate, and lay eggs before the sun returns. Because they are so dependent on the rain, they have become the canaries in the coal mine for climate change. If the rain patterns shift even slightly, entire generations of these frogs fail to emerge, and the forest goes silent. The human touch. The rain frog is a symbol of total synchronicity. It doesn't fight the environment. It waits for it. It teaches us about the power of perfect timing. For the rain frog, a storm isn't an inconvenience. It is the only window of time where it is truly alive. It reminds us to cherish the rains in our own lives. Those brief moments of opportunity where the conditions are finally right for us to come out of hiding and sing our song. We look at the Grand Canyon and we see a massive, jagged scar in the earth, a mile deep and 277 miles long. We give all the credit to the Colorado River, the mighty force that carved the rock. But the river is just the chisel. The rain is the hammer. Without the millions of years of localized, violent rainstorms hitting those canyon walls, the Grand Canyon wouldn't be a wide, majestic wonder. It would just be a narrow, boring slit in the ground. The deep dive. While the river carves the bottom of the canyon, it is sapping and sheet wash caused by rain that carves the width. When rain falls on the high desert plateau, it doesn't soak in. It gathers into flash floods that roar over the edges of the canyon. This water carries abrasive sediment, sand and pebbles, that acts like sandpaper, grinding away at the rock walls. Furthermore, rainwater is slightly acidic. As it seeps into the limestone and sandstone layers, it dissolves the cement that holds the rock together. Over millions of years, this process, called chemical weathering, weakens the walls until massive slabs of rock collapse into the river below to be carried away. This is why the canyon has its famous stair-step appearance. The hard layers of rock resist the rain, while the soft layers melt away. The Grand Canyon is essentially a massive, slow-motion sculpture created by the persistent tapping of raindrops over 6 million years. The human touch. This fact puts the power of small things into perspective. A single raindrop is nothing, but a billion raindrops, given enough time, can move mountains and hollow out the earth. It's a testament to the power of persistence. We often want big, dramatic changes in our lives, but the Grand Canyon tells us that the most beautiful and lasting things are created through small, consistent actions repeated over eons. Don't underestimate the rain in your life. It's shaping you, one drop at a time. We previously talked about the 2 million-year rain that birthed the dinosaurs. But what if I told you that wasn't the longest storm Earth has ever seen? Deep in our planet's ancient history, there was a period of such extreme climatic instability that it didn't just rain for a few million years. It rained off and on with tropical intensity for 12 million years. This was a time when the Earth was trying to figure out its own thermostat, and the result was a world that was more water than land. The deep dive. During the early Cenozoic era, shortly after the extinction of the dinosaurs, the Earth experienced a series of thermal maxima. The planet was so incredibly hot that the polar ice caps didn't just melt. They vanished entirely. Without ice to reflect the sun's energy, the oceans became hotbeds of evaporation. This created a super greenhouse world. Because the atmosphere was so saturated with water vapor, the storms weren't just rain. They were massive, continental-scale thermal events. Scientists studying deep-sea sediment cores have found layers of clay and silt that suggest a period of roughly 12 million years, where the runoff from land into the sea was constant. The rain during this era was so acidic and warm, the temperature of a hot bath, that it fundamentally changed the chemistry of the oceans, causing a massive die-off of deep-sea species while allowing the first primitive whales to evolve in the warm, shallow seas. It was a 12 million year period of liquid chaos that eventually cooled down to create the world we recognize today. The human touch. This fact is a reminder of the Earth's incredible scale. Our entire human civilization, from the first cave painting to the launch of the space station, has happened in a tiny fraction of the time that this one storm lasted. It teaches us that stability is a gift. We live in a brief, calm window of Earth's history. When we look at a rainstorm today, we are seeing a tiny, tamed version of the elemental power that once ruled our planet for millions of years. It makes every sunny day feel like a hard-won victory. We've looked at the shape of the rain and the sound of the rain, but let's look inside. If you could shrink down and step inside a single falling raindrop, you wouldn't find a simple blob of water. You would find an alien world of high-speed currents, electrical charges, and a skin stronger than steel, proportionally speaking. A raindrop isn't just falling. It is a self-contained, high-energy laboratory hurtling toward the ground. The deep dive. Inside a falling raindrop, the water is in constant, violent motion. Because of the air resistance on the outside, the hamburger bun effect, the water on the surface is pushed backward, creating two powerful internal vortices, like two tiny, liquid tornadoes spinning inside the drop. These currents help distribute heat and gases, allowing the drop to absorb CO2 and pollutants more efficiently. Furthermore, raindrops are often electrically charged. As they fall through the clouds and collide with ice crystals, they steal electrons. By the time a drop hits your head, it might be carrying a tiny electrical potential. On a massive scale, when billions of these liquid batteries fall together, they contribute to the electrical field of the Earth itself. The drop is also held together by surface tension, a force so strong that for its size, the skin of the water acts like a pressurized suit, keeping the drop from shattering into a mist until the very last second of impact. It is a masterpiece of physics, a tiny, pressurized capsule of life-giving liquid. There is beauty in the micro. We often look at the big picture, the dark clouds, the flooded streets, and forget that the entire thing is made of these perfect individual machines. It reminds us that there is complexity in everything, no matter how small. A single raindrop is as complex as a galaxy if you look closely enough. It teaches us to respect the small parts of our lives, because they are the building blocks of the big storms that define us. This is the final truth about the rain. Every drop that hits your skin today has been somewhere else before. It has been in the ice of a glacier, the sap of a redwood tree, the steam of a locomotive, and the clouds of a distant ocean. Rain is the Earth's way of making sure that no one ever owns water. It is the ultimate communal resource that belongs to everyone and no one at the same time. The deep dive. The water on Earth is a fixed amount. Aside from the occasional comet, we don't get new water. The rain is the mechanism that ensures this water stays moving. If the rain stopped, the water would eventually pool in the lowest places and become stagnant, salty, and dead. The rain is the pump that lifts the water out of the salty oceans, strips away the salt through evaporation, and delivers it as fresh water to the highest peaks of the mountains. This means that rain is the world's most successful recycling program. The molecule of water you drink today may have been a raindrop that fell on a medieval battlefield or a drop of dew on a prehistoric fern. It is a physical link between us and every living thing that has ever existed. The rain ensures that life can exist away from the coastlines. It is the bloodstream of the continents. Without it, the interior of our planet would be as dead as the moon. The human touch. This final fact brings us back to ourselves. We are made of 60% water. That means that, in a very real way, we are the rain. The water inside your cells right now was falling from the sky a few months or years ago. We aren't just observers of the weather. We are participants in it. When we protect our rain and our atmosphere, we are protecting ourselves. It's a beautiful circular reality. The sky takes care of the earth, and the earth, including us, must take care of the sky. Have you ever wondered why the smell of rain, that earthy, fresh petrichor, is almost universally loved? Why does a smell made of bacteria and plant oils make us feel so calm? The answer isn't just that it's pleasant. It's that your ancestors' lives depended on it. To a human in the wild 50,000 years ago, that smell was more than a fragrance. It was a life-saving GPS signal. The deep dive. Anthropologists and evolutionary biologists have a theory for our obsession with the scent of rain. For most of human history, we were nomadic. We moved where the resources were. In arid environments, finding water wasn't just a chore. It was the difference between the survival of the tribe and extinction. The chemical compound geosmin, which is released from the soil when rain hits, can be detected by the human nose at a concentration of 5 parts per trillion. To put that in perspective, a shark's ability to smell blood in the ocean is legendary, but humans are actually more sensitive to the smell of geosmin than a shark is to blood. When the wind carried the scent of a distant rainstorm toward a nomadic tribe, it acted as a beacon. It told them which way to walk to find green grass, edible plants, and prey animals that would soon congregate around the new water. We don't just like the smell of rain. We are biologically tuned to it as a signal of abundance. When you breathe in that post-storm air and feel a sense of relief, you are experiencing a 200,000-year-old echo of survival. The human touch. This fact bridges the gap between our modern, air-conditioned lives and our wild roots. We think we've conquered nature, but our noses are still searching for the monsoon. It reminds us that our emotions are often tied to ancient needs. The next time you see someone stop and take a deep breath of the air after a storm, know that they aren't just enjoying the weather. Their brain is subconsciously confirming that the world is safe and the water is here. What if you could make it rain on command? What if you could look at a gray cloud and, with the press of a button, force it to dump its water exactly where you wanted it? This sounds like the power of a god, but it's a technology we've been using since the 1940s. It's called cloud seeding, and it's currently the center of a silent global war. Because the truth is, if you make it rain in your backyard, you might be stealing that rain from your neighbors. The deep dive. Cloud seeding involves flying aircraft into a storm system and seeding it with particles of silver iodide or salt. These particles act as the nuclei we discussed in earlier facts. They give the water vapor something to cling to so it can form a drop and fall. Governments around the world, from China to the United Arab Emirates to the United States, use this to fight droughts and fill reservoirs. However, the atmosphere is a zero-sum game. A cloud only has a certain amount of moisture. If one country uses technology to force a cloud to rain over its wheat fields, that same cloud might arrive over the next country bone dry. This has led to rain theft accusations in international politics. Beyond the ethics, there is the question of unintended consequences. If you force a storm to break early, do you change the wind patterns for the rest of the continent? We are beginning to realize that when we hack the rain, we are tinkering with a machine that is far more complex than we ever imagined. The human touch. This fact moves the story of rain from nature into geopolitics. It shows our human desire to control the uncontrollable. We've always prayed for rain, danced for rain, and now we program the rain. But it leaves us with a haunting question. just because we can control the sky, should we? Teaches us that our actions have a downstream effect, literally. The water we take is always water someone else loses. In the Sahel region of Africa, there is a battle happening against the expanding Sahara Desert. The sand is moving south, swallowing villages and killing farms. But humanity is fighting back with a weapon made of wood and leaves. It's called the Great Green Wall, a 5,000-mile-long forest being planted across the continent. But the real hero of the story isn't the trees. It's the rain, and the clever way these people are trapping it before it can escape. The deep dive. The challenge in the Sahel isn't that it never rains. It's that when it does rain, it's violent and brief. The water hits the hard, baked earth and immediately runs off into the sea, taking the topsoil with it. To build the Great Green Wall, farmers have revived an ancient technique called pits. These are small pits dug into the earth and filled with organic waste. When the rare rains come, these pits act like water sponges, trapping the moisture and holding it deep in the soil where the sun can't evaporate it. This moisture then feeds the saplings of the wall. As the trees grow, they perform a miracle. They create their own rain. Through transpiration, the trees release moisture into the air, which cools the local atmosphere and triggers more frequent, gentle showers. The Green Wall isn't just a line of trees. It's a rain-recycled ecosystem. The project is slowly turning the desert back into a garden, one trapped raindrop at a time. The human touch. This is the most hopeful fact in our script. It shows that while we can steal rain, like in cloud seeding, we can also invite it. It shows that by working with the rain's natural rhythm, we can reverse the damage we've done to the planet. The Great Green Wall is a testament to what happens when human ingenuity stops trying to conquer the sky and starts trying to dance with it. It's a story of a second chance for the earth, written in the green leaves of 1,000 forests. When you think of a rainstorm, you think of a local event, something happening between the clouds and the ground. But what if I told you that a storm on the surface of the sun, 93 million miles away, could be the reason it's raining on your parade today? We are discovering that the rain isn't just an earthly cycle. It is a cosmic symphony conducted by the stars. The deep dive. This is one of the frontiers of modern meteorology. The link between galactic cosmic rays and cloud formation. Space is filled with high-energy particles from exploding stars and solar flares. When these particles hit our atmosphere, they strip electrons from air molecules, creating ions. These ions act like supermagnets for water vapor. Research suggests that during periods of low solar activity, more cosmic rays reach Earth, creating more ions, which in turn leads to more cloud seeds. This means that the thickness of the clouds above your head and the amount of rain that falls might be directly influenced by the weather in deep space. Furthermore, the solar wind, a stream of charged particles from the sun, warps the Earth's magnetic field, which can shift the path of the jet stream. A solar flare on Tuesday could theoretically shift a rainstorm from London to Paris by Friday. We are beginning to realize that the atmosphere is not a closed lid. It's an open window, and the universe is constantly throwing seeds through it. The human touch. This fact expands our sense of home. It reminds us that we don't just live on a planet. We live in a solar system. It turns a simple rainy afternoon into a cosmic event. When you see a lightning bolt or feel a heavy downpour, you might be feeling the ripple effect of a star that exploded millions of years ago or a sunspot that just turned toward Earth. It teaches us that everything, even the water in our gutters, is connected to the vast, swirling energy of the galaxy. In the Atacama Desert in Chile, there are riverbeds that have been dry for longer than humans have existed. There are mountains there that haven't seen a drop of rain in recorded history. But in 2015, something impossible happened. It rained. The driest place on Earth, was hit by a massive deluge. You'd think this was a miracle, but for the life that lived there, the rain was a catastrophe. It was a deadly rain that wiped out almost everything it touched. The deep dive. The microbes that live in the Atacama are the ultimate survivalists. They have evolved over millions of years to live in a world with zero liquid water. They have adapted to extract moisture directly from the air or from microscopic crystals in the soil. Their cellular chemistry is built for extreme dryness. When the 2015 megarain occurred due to an extreme El Niño event, it didn't bring life. It brought osmotic shock. The microbes, which were used to being thirsty, suddenly found themselves drowning. Their cells couldn't handle the sudden influx of water. They swelled up and literally exploded. Scientists estimate that 85% of the native microbial species in those lagoons were wiped out by the very thing that usually creates life. This serves as a grim reminder that life-giving rain is a relative term. On Earth, there are places so specialized for drought that rain is a toxic pollutant. The human touch. This is a lesson in perspective and balance. We often assume that more is better. More rain, more growth, more life. But the Atacama tells us that life is about stability. To the creatures of the deep desert, our version of perfect weather is an apocalypse. It reminds us to respect the unique dryness in the world and to understand that even the most beautiful things, like rain, can be destructive if they arrive in a world that isn't ready for them. Have you ever looked at a weather radar on the news and wondered how they can see the rain inside a cloud? It's not just a camera. It's a game of electronic shadows. But as our technology gets better, we're realizing that the radar doesn't just see the rain sees the radar back. We are entering an era where we can track the heartbeat of a single drop from miles away, and it's changing how we predict the future. The deep dive. Modern weather systems use dual polarization radar. Instead of sending out a single flat pulse, these radars send out pulses in two directions, horizontal and vertical. This allows the computer to measure the exact shape of the falling object. As we know from Fact 1, raindrops are hamburger bun shaped, wider than they are tall. Hail is more spherical. Snow is irregular. By analyzing the ratio of the horizontal and vertical shadows reflected back to the station, meteorologists can tell the difference between a heavy rainstorm, a hail core, and a swarm of insects in real time. This technology has increased the warning time for flash floods by nearly 50% in the last decade. We are no longer just guessing if it's raining. We are seeing the geometry of the storm as it happens. The human touch. This fact shows the incredible evolution of human sight. For 99% of our history, we looked at a dark cloud and wondered if we should run. Now, we use invisible waves to dissect the cloud from the comfort of our homes. It's a testament to our curiosity. We've turned the invisible rain into a clear, colorful map. It reminds us that while we can't stop the storm, our ability to see it coming is the greatest umbrella we've ever built. We've all said it. Hey, I can't make it tonight. Can I take a rain check? It's one of the most common idioms in the English language, used for everything from business meetings to coffee dates. But have you ever stopped to think about why we use a weather metaphor to describe a schedule change? The rain check isn't just a polite excuse. It began as a desperate 19th century business strategy to stop angry crowds from rioting. The deep dive. The term originated in the 1870s in the world of American Major League Baseball. Back then, stadiums were open air and drainage was primitive. If a sudden summer thunderstorm rolled in and canceled the game in the third inning, thousands of fans who had paid their hard-earned money would be left standing in the mud, furious. To prevent chaos and financial ruin, team owners began issuing physical paper stubs known as rain checks. These stubs allowed the fan to return on a different day to see a different game for free. It was a revolutionary concept in consumer rights, the first time a business acknowledged that the act of God, the rain, shouldn't be the customer's financial burden. By the 1880s, the practice spread to theaters and eventually into our daily vocabulary. When you ask for a rain check today, you are participating in a 150-year-old tradition of acknowledging that the sky has the final say over our plans, and that human grace is the only way to navigate it. The human touch. There is a profound social lesson in the rain check. It is an admission of powerlessness. It's our way of saying, I wanted to be there, but the world had other plans. Turns an inconvenience into a promise. In a world that demands 100% productivity and perfect schedules, the rain check is a humble reminder that we are still subject to the whims of nature. It teaches us that when the rain washes away our plans, the best thing we can do is offer each other a path back. You see it on the news all the time. A 1,000-year rain event has just hit the city. It sounds like something out of a prophecy. It makes it seem like we are safe for another 10 centuries once the clouds clear. But here is the terrifying truth that city planners don't like to talk about. A 1,000-year rainstorm doesn't happen once every 1,000 years. It can happen twice in the same week. We aren't measuring time. We are measuring a roll of the cosmic dice. The deep dive. In meteorology and civil engineering, the term 1,000-year storm is a statistical shorthand for a 0.1% annual exceedance probability. It means that in any given year, there is a 1 in 1,000 chance of a storm of that specific intensity occurring. It's like a giant wheel of fortune with 1,000 slots. Every year, the atmosphere spins the wheel. Just because the ball landed on the megastorm slot this year doesn't mean that slot is removed for next year. Because of climate change and the warming of the oceans, which provides more fuel for rain, these statistics are breaking. Cities built for 100-year storms are being hit by 500-year storms every decade. We are living in an era where the statistical anomalies are becoming the new baseline. When engineers design a bridge or a dam, they are betting against the math of the sky. But the sky doesn't care about our spreadsheets. The 1,000-year storm is a reminder that the extreme is always possible, and our infrastructure is only as strong as our ability to imagine the impossible. The human touch. This fact changes how we view safety. We like to believe that if we build a wall high enough, we are safe forever. But the math of rain teaches us humility. It tells us that we must build our lives and our cities not just for the average day, but for the impossible day. It's a lesson in resilience. True strength isn't about knowing when the storm will come. It's about being ready to catch the water whenever the wheels stop spinning. If you look at a map of the world, you'll see a green belt of tropical rainforests around the equator and brown belts of deserts just above and below them. We think of these as permanent fixtures of the Earth, but the rain is moving. Because of the warming of the planet, the rain belt, the massive band of clouds that encircles the Earth, is shifting north. We are witnessing a slow-motion migration of the sky that will eventually force millions of people to follow the clouds or perish. The deep dive. This belt is scientifically known as the Intertropical Convergence Zone, ITCZ. It is the place where the trade winds of the northern and southern hemispheres meet, forcing air upward and creating constant, heavy rainfall. It is the engine of the world's tropical weather. However, as the northern hemisphere warms faster than the south, due to having more landmass, the ITCZ is being pulled toward the heat. Even a shift of a few miles can have catastrophic effects. For countries in the Sahel of Africa or parts of Central America, a northward shift of the rain belt means the monsoon that usually feeds their crops simply disappears. At the same time, regions further north might experience tropical rains they aren't prepared for. This is the hidden side of climate change. It's not just about the heat, it's about the remapping of the water. We are entering an age where the geography of survival is being rewritten by the clouds. The human touch, the migration of the sky, is perhaps the most significant story of our century. It reminds us that our borders are artificial. A line on a map doesn't mean anything to a cloud. We are all passengers on a planet where the life support system is shifting. It teaches us that we must be as fluid as the rain itself, willing to adapt, willing to share, and willing to realize that when the rain moves, humanity has to move with it. Close your eyes and imagine a pure mountain spring, fed by fresh rainwater falling in a remote wilderness. It's the ultimate image of nature's perfection. But science has a cold, hard truth for us. That image no longer exists. Today, it is raining plastic. From the peaks of the Rocky Mountains to the middle of the Pyrenees, the rain is carrying a secret synthetic cargo that we never intended to launch into the sky. The deep dive. For a long time, we thought plastic pollution was an ocean problem, bottles and bags floating in the sea. But researchers using high-powered microscopes have discovered that microplastics, fragments smaller than 5 millimeters, have become part of the global atmospheric cycle. When plastic waste breaks down in the ocean or on roads, the fragments become so light that they can be picked up by the wind. They act as unintended nuclei for raindrops. As the water vapor condenses, it clings to these tiny bits of polyester, nylon, and polyethylene. When the rain falls, it deposits these plastics into the most untouched environments on Earth. In a study of the American West, scientists estimated that over 1,000 tons of microplastics fall on protected national parks every year via the rain. We have effectively created a new type of weather, a synthetic rain that is literally repainting the chemistry of the planet's surface. The human touch. This is a sobering fact that forces us to look at the rain with new eyes. It's a reminder that there is no away. When we throw something away, it eventually breaks down and finds its way back to us, sometimes falling from the clouds. It teaches us about the radical connectivity of our world. The rain is a mirror. It reflects exactly what we have put into the environment. It's not just a natural phenomenon anymore. It's a ledger of human activity. If you fly over the arid grasslands of Namibia or the outback of Australia, you will see a pattern that looks like a giant, natural polka dot quilt. Thousands of circular patches of bare red earth, each surrounded by a ring of lush green grass. They call them fairy circles. For decades, scientists argued over what caused them. Was it termites? Gas? Aliens? The answer turned out to be far more elegant. The grass is calculating the rain. The deep dive. Fairy circles are a masterpiece of self-organization. In regions where rain is extremely scarce, plants have to compete for every single drop. The grass species in these areas have evolved a genius socialist water management system. The plants grow in a ring shape to create a water catchment. When the rare rains fall, the bare soil in the center of the circle acts as a funnel. Because there are no roots in the center, the water soaks deep into the earth. The grass on the edges then extends its roots horizontally under that bare patch to drink the reservoir. By sacrificing the center of the circle, the colony ensures that enough water is stored to survive the long droughts. It's a mathematical solution to survival. The distance between the circles is determined by exactly how much rain falls each year. If it rains more, the circles get closer together. If it rains less, they spread out to give each colony more space to harvest the sky. The human touch. The fairy circles teach us about the intelligence of the quiet world. We think of plants as passive, but they are actually performing complex spatial geometry to survive. It's a lesson in cooperation and sacrifice. To save the group, they leave a space in the center. It reminds us that sometimes the best way to handle a limited resource isn't to fight over every drop, but to organize ourselves in a way that makes the most of what little we have. There is a reason the cat on a hot tin roof or the sound of rain on a corrugated metal shack is such a powerful literary image. It's not just about the heat. It's about the unique acoustic violence of rain hitting metal. On a shingle roof, rain is a whisper. On a tin roof, it's a percussion section. But the reason it sounds the way it does is because a tin roof turns a rainstorm into a giant, vibrating mechanical speaker. The deep dive. When a raindrop hits a hard, thin material like corrugated tin, the energy transfer is almost instantaneous. Unlike wood or thatch, which absorbs the impact energy and turns it into heat, metal is elastic. The impact of the drop causes the entire sheet of metal to flex and vibrate at its resonant frequency. Because the sheets are often large and hollow underneath, the roof acts as a soundboard, amplifying the vibration just like the body of a guitar. The patter you hear isn't just the water. It's the metal snapping back into shape thousands of times per second. Furthermore, the corrugation, the wavy shape of the metal adds structural stiffness, which raises the pitch of the sound, turning a low thud into a metallic ping. This creates a white noise effect that is so consistent it can actually trigger a meditative state in the human brain, explaining why so many people find the loudest rainstorms to be the most relaxing. The human touch. This fact celebrates the low-tech joy of the storm. It's a reminder that our homes aren't just shelters. They are instruments that the weather plays. It connects us to a sense of place. Whether it's a porch in the American South or a village in Southeast Asia, that sound is a universal language of safety. When the rain plays the roof, it tells us that we are inside, we are dry, and the world is doing exactly what it's supposed to do. In the town of Lloro, Honduras, the residents celebrate a festival every year called Lluvia de Pex. They aren't celebrating a myth or a legend. They are celebrating a recurring weather event. Every summer, after a massive, violent thunderstorm, the streets are quite literally paved with hundreds of small, silver, living fish. To the locals, it's a miracle from the 1850s. To science, it's a terrifying lesson in the vacuum power of the sky. The deep dive. Animal rain is a phenomenon documented as far back as the Roman Empire. The most common explanation is the tornadic waterspout. When a powerful tornado forms over a body of shallow water, it acts like a giant vacuum cleaner, sucking up everything in the surface layer, water, silt, and small creatures like fish or frogs. These animals are carried high into the cumulonimbus clouds, where they can be transported for miles. However, the Lloro case has a twist. Some scientists believe the fish don't fall down from the sky, but are flushed up from underground streams. The heavy rain floods subterranean caverns, forcing the blind fish to the surface. Regardless of the direction, it proves that the rain is a powerful enough force to blur the lines between the water in the ground and the water in the heavens. It is the only time the harvest comes to the farmer without a single seed being planted. Whether it's a miracle or a waterspout, the rain of fish teaches us about the wonder of the unexpected. It's a reminder that nature still has the power to shock us, to break our routines, and to provide in ways we don't understand. In Lloro, the people don't hide from the storm of fish. They go out with buckets. It's a lesson in adaptability. When life gives you a storm, you look for the gift hidden in the clouds. Think about a mosquito in a rainstorm. To that tiny, fragile insect, a single falling raindrop is the equivalent of a human being hit by a bus. In a heavy downpour, a mosquito is struck by a water bus every few seconds. By all the laws of physics, every mosquito on Earth should be crushed to death the moment the clouds break. But they aren't. They fly through the storm as if nothing is happening. How does something so weak survive a force so massive? In 2012, researchers at Georgia Tech used high-speed cameras to solve this mystery. They discovered that the mosquito's secret is its lack of resistance. Because a mosquito is so incredibly light, It doesn't try to fight the raindrop. When the drop hits the mosquito, the insect doesn't provide enough counterforce to make the drop explode. Instead, the mosquito simply hitches a ride. The insect is joined to the leading edge of the drop and falls with it for a few centimeters. Because the mosquito is covered in water-repellent hairs, it quickly slides off the side of the drop, performs a mid-air recovery, and continues its flight. It's the ultimate lesson in kinematics. The mosquito survives not by being strong, but by being so small that the raindrop barely notices it's there. It experiences a force of up to 300 GS, enough to kill a human instantly, but because its entire body moves as one, it emerges unscathed. The mosquito in the rain is a powerful metaphor for resilience. It teaches us that you don't always have to be tough to survive a crisis. Sometimes the best way to handle a massive, overwhelming force is to stop resisting it. If you move with the drop instead of fighting it, you might find that you can slide off the side and keep flying. It's the strength of the flexible over the rigidity of the strong. A little deeper into comfort. The day is behind you now, and there is nowhere you need to be but here, resting. And if you're still awake, there will be another video on screen for you to continue the journey a little longer. If these calm explorations help you unwind, you might also like, subscribe, or leave a thought below. IT helps other sleepy souls find their way here, too. For now, let your thoughts settle and let the night carry you the rest of the way. Sleep well and good night.